Noel.
Mr. Chairman, just for background, we went out for RFQs, and I think the responses were back in November. We kind of put it on hiatus for a little while we were waiting to get the property from the state. And as we've talked about before, we're ready to move forward. We think the state is close to conveying the property to us, but of course we would not enter into an agreement formally until we actually have the property from the state. But in the interest of saving time, we want to go ahead and go through the selection process, negotiate with the firm we think would be best suited to do this work, and go ahead and have a contract ready to go once the state approves the transfer of the property. Having said that, I think Noel, refresh my memory, I think you got in 9 or 10 requests on this.
We interviewed 7. We got in 7.
Okay. And we have now narrowed it down. Originally, it was to 4 finalists. One of those has dropped out because they got a fairly large job and didn't feel they were able to do this one and that one as well. So we have the 3 finalist firms with us here today. And at this time, I'm going to ask Noel to introduce the firm.
Today, our first team is MHA Works out of Greenville, North Carolina. MHA Works has developed a solid experience in working with feasibility studies and needs assessment in judicial buildings. They will be partnering with DLR Group for this project if chosen. DLR Group is a nationally recognized leader in justice facilities, planning, and design, including jail detention facilities and law enforcement.
That was great, thank you. Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners, Manager, my name is Michael Heining with MHA Works. This is my partner and good friend, Albie McLaughlin, who also is the director of our Greenville office. We will be the boots on the ground, if you will, the regional architect. And our mission, it will be to be sure that we give you the information that you need to make a sound, economical decision on what to do about the new jail facility. Now, we are the regional architect, but in order to strengthen our firm, we have asked DLR Group to join us. They are a nationally recognized justice design firm with nationally recognized design projects. Tim Gibson and Jeff Buck, and they'll be talking a little bit later. This slide right here is really what we do. I started the firm in 1988, and a lot of firms were doing new work. Every architect wants to do new work. That wasn't meant for us. We were meant for renovation work. And once we got into the renovation work and the adaptive reuse and repurposing, that's pretty much all we did. About 80% of our work, even to this day, is still this type of renovation work, making something out of something that you think you couldn't make anything out of, to be honest with you. Albie?
And what we want to do today is to essentially focus on what unique qualities our team would bring to this endeavor. We understand right now this is essentially just a feasibility study, and we feel like we have assembled the best team to address the concerns and needs of this county relative to the types of issues that will come up through feasibility. Mike and I will represent the project from the MHA Works side throughout the duration of the project. Should it extend beyond feasibility, we would remain the face of MHA Works through the duration of the project. We realize that continuity of leadership is often where projects falter. We will be the boots on the ground and roll our hands up throughout the course of this process. Both Tim and Jeff Buck with DLR Group likewise will be involved throughout the duration of the project. And with us today, we also have a couple of our other consultants that aren't sitting up here, but Jim Benson and Duncan McFadden represent our PM&E engineering for this particular endeavor. A lot of being able to evaluate facilities like this is understanding what cost ramifications those types of things have. That's potentially a big chunk of making this usable space. And the balance of our design team, RPA Engineering and Rivers and Associates, are located in Greenville, North Carolina. All of us have worked together, multiple projects successfully, and we would be glad to have any of you check references of those projects. We really want to break this down into very simple terms today. We feel like that with a renovation, the hidden costs, especially the hidden costs of operation, are where projects typically get kind of tied up, and you start to, if you don't flesh everything out as early as possible, that's where situations don't run smoothly, and that's why a lot of architects, frankly, don't do renovation work. MHA Works has proven, 25 years of proven expertise with that regard. We've probably done 800 projects that are renovation projects in the course of that time. That's a fairly conservative estimate. And most of those have started with feasibility analysis, very much like what we're talking about doing for this particular project. Our project approach is essentially very basic. I'm not going to go through the bullets of that. Y'all all have that in front of you, but we want to focus in on the balance of this discussion, what we will specifically do with this particular project and how we can best serve your needs.
Again, my name is Tim Gibson with the DLR Group. When we start looking at needs assessments, we also get focused in on the building footprints, the available space, what your need projections are, what your needs are going to be over the 5 and 10, 15-year increments, but we also need to be very concerned about what your operational costs are over the life cycle cost of this facility. Looking at this pie chart here, this is a breakdown over 30 years what you're likely to spend in a detention facility. 60% of your costs here shown in yellow are operations. These are just staffing costs for your facility. 20% is your utilities and maintenance. 9% is food and inmate services. So 89% of your total costs over 30 years are directly related to the operations of this facility. So you can see we need to be very focused on that when we look at the reuse of this facility, because how we lay that out and how we configure it has a lot of impact on your long-term cost. And when you talk about these staffing costs, really what we're talking about in the end is the correctional officers and how we man this facility internally. Your most valuable resource is your correctional officer, and also is one of the highest costs operationally for your facility. As you can see here in this example of a housing unit configuration, every single housing pod has an officer stationed in it with one in central control. This is a very staff-intensive model. What you're currently seeing today is something that operates actually more like this, where you have a single 24-hour post in a central location and officers that move about in different housing units as they're needed. For every 24-hour, 7-day-a-week post we create in our design and our analysis, we are looking at 5 correctional officers. That's how much it takes to staff one 24-hour position during the course of a week. If you look at the cost associated with each position, and for the sake of discussion today, I rounded it to $40,000 a year. And that takes into account the salaries, benefits, insurance, retirement, pay time off. So for every staff position that you're looking in this facility, an annual cost of approaching $200,000. It's a significant cost. Multiply that times 4. Let's say a new housing unit or a reuse of one causes 4 additional correctional officer positions. Over the next 30 years, this is a $24 million cost to the project. So obviously, when we look at these facilities, not only are we concerned about the first cost, which are the renovation and new construction costs, but we're also very concerned about what are the long-term impacts of what we're doing, what we're planning. In addition to that, you're going to be looking at some other costs. There's some transportation costs that are going to be incurred. You're no longer going to have the jail adjacent to the downtown courthouse. As you can see in this diagram, you're looking at about 3 miles transportation. You're going to have transportation vehicles that you haven't had the need for before. Staff demand those, expenses for those vehicles, because you're going to need to move folks back and forth between the courthouse and the jail. Some of that can be dealt with video arraignment. We're very familiar with those processes, but ultimately, at some point, whoever's in that jail will end up in a courtroom, unless they're released outright. So we want to talk about what is our approach. We've talked about some of the hidden costs for operations. How are we going to approach solving your issue? It really begins with a very simple equation. We look at your projected needs, we examine your existing conditions, and that yields what the scope of the project or what we're going to be addressing in the end. We'll come back to this in a moment. So we're starting with a needs assessment focus. Obviously, inmate projection, population projections are critical to understanding what your future needs are going to be. We are going to look at your historical records, and we'll go back as far as your records exist. Typically 10 years would be a very good sample. We're going to look at current trends. We're going to look at your population growth overall in county because that's a direct correlation to your inmate population growth. We're going to look at your caseloads. Those also have impact on that. How fast people process through your system has a great impact on the population that winds up in your facility.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Those actually are, is that graph actually?
That is not your county. I'm sorry. That's an example.
It's close.
Yeah, you're perhaps as where you're at today, maybe not that far from that example.
Thank you.
We'll develop a number of numerical models, statistical models that'll help us predict these, and then we'll, show you how we computed all this and then come up with an average that helps us kind of forecast where you're going to be in 5, 10, and 15-year increments out in the future. Ultimately, though, it's not just about the numbers, it's also understanding what populations you have in your facility. This is, again, not your facility, but an example. And as you can see here, our analysis of this particular showed that they needed 20% of their population in a maximum security environment, 40% in medium and 40% in minimum. So the types of environment that we're producing or we're providing in this facility need to directly correspond to what that is in your facility. So if we need, let's say, 20 or 30 maximum security cells, then we're going to have to provide single occupancy cells for that application. Your minimum may be dormitories. It really depends on the conversation that we have with the sheriff and the staff, understanding what their particular needs are. And also, we have to keep in mind that gender separation is also very important and has impact on that as well. Male and female populations have to be completely separated from sight and sound separation. So we all have to take that into account also. And female populations are actually one of the largest growing segments in jails today. They're proportionally growing faster than male populations are. So we need to be cognizant of that fact as well.
And very similar to a lot of what Tim is mentioning, a lot of the expertise that the DLR group brings to our team is something that is on a national scale. But when it comes down to a feasibility study, being able to actually go out, look at the facility, Mike Heining, the president of our company, toured the facility with many of you 2 weeks ago, and actually having the people sort of driving the decisions, seeing those things firsthand is really valuable. So I don't want to short sell how valuable our relationship is. Every team to do a job like this well needs the national capacity to understand all the trends that Tim was just referencing. But you also have to have the boots on the ground that can actually get into the facilities, can come back when you couldn't see something because a room was locked, and that the travel distance is not a hurdle that you're basically paying for someone to overcome. We've got 42 miles between our office and your location, and one of the things that MHA Works endeavors to do is we're not a big A architect. We are a service architect. We aim to out-service our competitors. And so you will see us as much on this job as it needs to as you need to for this job to be done right in all of your eyes. So that's one of the things that being close to a job enables us to do, and has been a big part of our success over that 25 years. I initially mentioned that the people that you see here will actually be with the project through the duration of the project. Mike Heining and I were actually working on a project for East Carolina about 8 years ago, They wanted to get into the building early because they realized that if they got in at the beginning of the semester, they could actually utilize the building for the full semester rather than come in the middle of a semester. So we were there the day after Christmas, he and I, doing the punch list. So that's one of the things that you get when you hire local folks who work together with a team of people repeatedly, is we leverage our relationships. And because we've done so many different types of renovation projects, one of the jobs that we've actually recently done in Durham is a renovation of an abandoned jail into a resource center for criminal justice. It's actually the first lead project for Durham County. So we have a lot of experience when it comes to assessing this type of correctional facility, not just general renovation expertise. Jeff?
Good afternoon. And I think we've heard some good news today. We've heard the passion and commitment you have to not spending money you don't need to. The good news is we know how to help you get there. So let's talk a little bit about the steps in the process of getting an answer for you. Go back to the simple equation for a minute. Tim and Albie have talked about the first two elements. It's not too complicated to figure out what you need down the road, what that population's going to be. We got the models and all that stuff. We have a wonderful team ready to go to figure out what you've got as available resources that we can apply against that. So then what do? What we do is called a shortfall analysis. What's the difference between what you need and what you've got to work with? And the thing is, you can get there a lot of different ways. You can renovate an existing building, expand a facility you acquire and change that, or build a new facility. There are a lot of different ways to get here. And our role in this is to really provide the information you need to make a well-informed decision, like you were talking about. Let's not spend money that we don't have to get the same result. What's important is our role in this is, I've been doing this 30 years. It does not matter what my vision of the future is. It's not my facility. It's your facility and key stakeholders. Our job is to bring the technical expertise, the creative energy, the ideas, and the objective information that you need to make a decision. So what's going to make a good jail? Well, we work all over the country. I hate to tell you how long I've been doing this. I like to think I'm really, really experienced rather than just older. First thing we're going to look at, Tim touched on, housing targeted to classification. You need to get the housing capable of accommodating the security levels you have, but there's another reason. High security, maximum security is a lot more expensive than dormitories, so we want to get that right to handle what you need to, but not overspend on what you need to do. Next thing we really have evolved in the last 10 years, and we've been part of that evolutionary process, is in a good jail today, when an arrestee comes in and a judicial officer remands him to the jail, we want that individual to go to a housing unit and not leave that housing unit unless he needs to go to an emergency room in a hospital, make a court appearance or a jury trial, or be released. And why do we want that? Because if you have to move inmates around, like multiple floors, to go to a recreation area, it takes staff. Today, as Tim was talking about, the cost, the logic you really have to look at is how do you get an effective operational cost? How do you operate as effectively? And it's not just numbers, but what we call staff efficacy. How do we make it so staff can do their jobs as well as possible? So it's not just the numbers. So On the housing units, we provide recreation, food, video visitation, ordering commissary, getting medical checkups, all that stuff. We don't have to move them around. We spend a lot of time on housing unit design, because the larger the housing unit is, and you have some limits on a floor now, you have to staff. But this is a simple geometry that shows that you can have a overall scheme that allows you to have single cells, double cells, 4-person cells, 8-person cells in the same basic geometry. And you see the green there is recreation. We have video visitation and all the other things that go with it. We're going to spend a bunch of time looking at, with the Sheriff's Office, on cell design. We need to meet the minimum state standards. We need to have some multiple occupancy cells perhaps, and we need to deal with special populations. I think one of the things that we're going to be focused on, particularly in the primary option here of conversion of that correctional facility, is special needs housing, acute mental health, a female unit that gets them out of the rest of the place, infirmary, and high security segregation space. We have to get everything else right too. We need to get the administration, the program, the support, the plant operations all done well. And in the proposed project, we're going to be looking at the potential of moving the Sheriff's Office out to the same site. We think there's at least 3 options. I have been in government. I spent a number of years responsible for the capital programs for the New York State Department of Correctional Services at a point in time where their population was going up 200 to 400 inmates a month. So I was a very busy guy finding more space. But one of the things I learned from being in government, and I'm sure you have too, is that when you need to make a decision, it's good to be in a position that if some constituent says, well, did you think about this? That you can say, yes, we did. So we're going to look at a whole range of options and variations so that nobody can come up and say, well, you didn't look at that. We're going to look at that. So there's at least 3 options and some variations that we need to look at. The first and foremost is conversion of the Wayne Correctional Center. You've got a great opportunity. We think this can be done, and we need to look at this as with the Sheriff's Office out there or not, maybe a split operations. But the second option is reuse of the existing jail. Somebody's going to ask, why don't you just keep doing what you're doing and put some more space on it? And the other thing to look at is an all-new facility, because that would have the tendency to generate a baseline for comparison for operational costs, because you could get that staffing perhaps a little better. Here's an example in Ocala, Florida, which is Marion County. We were asked to do a study of a whole bunch of different options. This shows you what some of the sketches we do look like. The option on the left involves acquiring some additional property to add on to the existing facility. I'm showing you this chart. I invented this and call this the stoplight chart. Red, green, and yellow. And what we did is, in a series of meetings with the county commissioners and key stakeholders, is we developed a list of criteria to evaluate options with. And then we came together, we developed those options, we brought them in, we talked about them as a group, and we rated them. What's the best option up here? The third column. It's got the most green. So our intent is to provide you the kind of quality of information that makes the decision about what to do fairly straightforward. Now, the one red one on there is the ease of implementation. They got to buy property, so that's harder to do than property you already own. The first option, primary option, is to look at the Wayne Correctional Facility. And we're going to look at a 20-year horizon. So there will be some costs because it isn't the best facility in DOC's arsenal. We need to look at the cost it's going to take to keep that online for 20 years. But the real key here is going to be the creative thinking that goes into how do you convert what they've got there, which is almost all dormitories, to get some cells and higher security space in there for the inmates you're going to have. Here's a project from MHA Works, where they converted kind of an eyesore that was a former Walmart store to really nice professional county offices. The point of this is, we can do it. You can convert almost anything to something else. Now, when I was with New York State Department of Correctional Services, I converted warehouses, old TB hospitals, mental health facilities, Butler buildings, from what they were to prison space. I got a new challenge here. This is going to be great. How do you convert a prison to a jail? It can be done. The second option, reuse of the existing jail, I don't know how well that's going to work, but we need to give it a test and see how it works. This is an example where in the District of Columbia we were asked to study expanding an existing facility and reconfiguring it. And it turned out that the operational construct there was so messed up that by building a new facility, even though it was going to be pretty expensive, it paid for itself in 6 years. The all-new facility is perhaps easier in a sense that we've done a lot of these. The life cycle cost is going to be higher on the capital side because you may have to acquire a site. And if that site doesn't have enough water and power and sewage, that can get to be pretty darn expensive. But we can do that. In fact, here's another example of the kind of analysis we did. The North Dakota State Legislature was split. They didn't know if they needed to expand the existing prison or build a new one. This is the expansion on the bottom. This is a new one. We looked at it on 7 different sites. This is a summary spreadsheet from about a 60-page analysis that shows that over the life cycle 20-year cost, the first column is reuse, the second one is new on the same property. There was less than 1% difference in the total cost over 20 years. No wonder they couldn't figure out offhand which was better. It was a wash. So in this case, they were able to say, well, we're going to renovate the existing facility because we can capital improve that in phases, and we don't have to come up with the big hunk of cash to begin with, even though, and they knew this was not going to cost them more in the long run for the same product. We've done it. This is a complex in Hancock County that shows a sheriff's office and a court area. Because they're outside the security perimeter of the jail part, this can be standard commercial construction. They can also have their own image. And this is about a 200-bed jail, about 90,000 square feet. So, our business and our task is to provide you with the information you need for a decision.
So to say again, why our team, why MHA Works, DLR Group, we intend to do the work that needs to be done so that you can make the decision that you need to make. It's as simple as that. And with that, we'll go to questions. If you've got a copy of this, and some of you do, you notice there's a lot more slides that we're going to save you from. But they were used at our original presentation, and if you have any questions, we can pull them up to discuss them. But other than that, we're open to your questions. We're excited about this project, and I hope that you can see your way to handing us the commission for it.
Okay, fellas, we're open for questions.
Question, Joe. Mr. Chairman. As I view the prison, I think one of the overriding concerns of the staff that operate our prison, our jail facilities is a safety concern. It's primarily a safety concern. As I went out there and viewed that, I saw where they had dormitory style, I suppose that's what we're going to classify that as. And I want to say that they had 54 or so inmates per pod.
4 pods.
And I do recall back last year, we had some studying done in regards to a renovation of another facility here in town, where Brennan and Associates, I believe was the firm, had suggested that we renovate that and have a dormitory-style facility. Can you elaborate, for my mind, in regards to when is it appropriate to use a dormitory-style facility and when not to?
Yes, sir. At this point, it's appropriate for me to call on our national.
Okay. Excellent question. You know, the purpose of the jail is for judicial officers to remand people so that they show up for trial or that they're potential danger. Now, typically, what we find across the country is about 70% of the jail population's pretrial, innocent, and about 30% is sentenced locally. If you get a long sentence, you go to the state. If you get a shorter sentence, like a year or less, serve that locally. Now, typically, your sentenced population, which would be about 30% of your population, are cupcakes. They're not going to create problems. If they create problems, they're going to get a higher sentence and go to the state. So that kind of population, through the classification process, you can probably put in dormitories. So that leaves about 70% that you need some kind of more secure environment. Now, the follow-up to your question is talking about the facility that you want to convert. We need to get some cells out there. But we got walls, we got floors, the way this is done, and Tim's been involved in doing this as well, is a company that makes 2-inch high-security metal concrete-filled panels. They prefabricate the cells. We can probably get close to the at least 32 cells in those dormitories that are in the front building. And we can go to vacuum plumbing, because if you got to have toilet in every cell and sink, you don't want to be digging up the floor. Now, I know they're loud, but they can come in overhead and they're very environmentally good. So there are ways and tricks that we've used and strategies we've used to convert warehouses and all kinds of places to a secure facility, so it can be done. But when we looked at it, we didn't see a lot of drawdown. Apparently the facility's about 400 beds now. We didn't see a drastic reduction in converting the 2, 4, 6, 8, the 10 housing units or so that are out there as a real drastic change down.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. 2 questions. One is I'll save the second one for just a moment. The first one is to get a vision of an existing facility, and with that existing facility, to have a vision with infrastructure or infrastructure needed to move 30 years down the road, i.e. so we won't be in this. Could you get them to turn this down, please? I'm getting some strong feedback on this mic. I'm scared to death. This building, this jail was built by an architect who had a vision of building the same tower next to it. I don't want to be in the same condition or position 20 years from now, the commissioner saying, well, it was nice 20 years ago when they were reactive instead of proactive and went out here and got this piece of property because it was going to be conveyed by the state of North Carolina and we were going to get free property. The footprint that we have out there now, compatible for whatever. I understand the safety part, but converting it and looking at it for 20 to 30 years out if we can acquire the property, do we acquire more property? And with your company giving us the crystal ball of that, if you had this property, you can do this now. But you can do this, and you can do this, because the picture in here shows Sheriff's Department, a courthouse, and an administrative office, and it shows it all in one campus. So if we have the availability to look 20, 30 years down the road, then it might be 30, 40 years down the road where we abandon this and go out there because we had planned early. So in your moving forward with your company, can you elaborate on how you might do that?
I'd like to say that we've talked about this, actually. The fact is that site out there, it's a gift horse at this point. And we'll wait and see how healthy the horse is. We don't really know. We know some things about it. But there's not enough land out there right now.
There's not.
Not to do everything that you referred to on that sketch. We think that
Are we limited, or will we be landlocked?
well, you could be landlocked. I don't know that you will be, but that is a chance. But anywhere you go, if you were building a new facility, you potentially could be landlocked as well. But, you know, this county, you don't want to take a lot of land out of production. We understand that about Wayne County. Farming is your life. And we have respect for that, and that's just the way it ought to be. Out there is property. If we can negotiate with the state, if there's other property out there that you could add to it, I would suggest doing that as quick as possible and tie it down. Because you don't know what you're going to be doing in 30 years. You don't want to be in the same position. You just don't.
Okay. Sustainability to me, Mr. Chairman, if I can follow up with this, sustainability money, now that we're paying out other counties, and counties are asking us for new facilities, hey, send us your overflow because we need the money, for say like Greene County. So, and you're familiar with that being the attorney for Greene County. So we're sending over there to help them out. But let's reverse it and bring it back to Wayne County. If we have 400 bids and we've expensed it, we have enterprise parts of our county governance, as you know. And would this be something that we could market? You mentioned females being more, so if there's a shortage of that in the region, and we can see this opportunity to create something out there that will not be limited, but yet the sky's the limit for the sheriff and the jailer and all that system can actually make money. There's parts. I saw laundry in here, and I mean, what can we do out there? Can you elaborate on if we had to make money, being in the jail or prison business, what can we do out there?
Following up on the first part of your question.
I know it was pretty deep.
Following up on the first part that you were talking about, that Mike was addressing, for a low-rise jail, level jail, the minimum site area that we would look for is 7 acres, and that's about what's within the fence out there. For 400 beds or so, if that's in the range. So in order, for the sheriff's office to go out there and all of their circulation functions and at least one courtroom, you're going to need some more space. Now, that may be in the government property out there already. There's definitely not enough to move the county government center out there. But you may not want to. The other aspect that you were alluding to in the downtown facility, there are certain restrictions when you have a vertical jail. So in terms of flexibility for the future, if it's a single level, it's a lot easier to deal with it and remanipulate it. And we always design for future expansion and change. It just happens. 10 years down the road, you need this or that, and so we always design stuff. In fact, the sketch we showed you with the housing unit, can do another one right behind that and one behind that, so. As long as you're not trying to build additional housing units all by themselves, you can make some money if you overbuild a little. There's all these classifications you have to accommodate, you know, males and females, and high security and low security, and mental health, and all those things. But if you build the right number, or maybe a little bit more than you need, if you're looking 10 years out, yeah, you can probably make some money off boarding in instead of boarding out. And it's a good thing to do. You should do it as much as you can. The risk factor is you can't count on that income forever. I mean, even a lot of counties have had ICE inmates from the federal government. Well, they've changed in the last 2 years. Immigration holds for deportation hearings. And typically they're civilians, they're not real criminals. But most of them have been held in county jails for the last 10 years. But they're moving away from that. And so getting a long-term contract from the federal government to house people here is somewhat tenuous. But if you have any surplus space, particularly for special needs like acute mental health, the problem people, females, you know, the problems. So, and that kind of thing, infirmary beds, that kind of thing, you may have a lot of people interested in providing some inmates for you. And that could be a good cost income.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask something?
Yes, sir.
Since we sent out the RFQ, one of the issues that we're looking at very acutely is we're spending about $850,000 a year farming inmates out. And so one of the key issues for this county is there some way that you could possibly expedite an analysis of whether or not we could use part of that out there, even if it's on a temporary basis, but hopefully where you can incorporate that permanently if the other analysis worked out, to go ahead and get some cell space there, with the understanding that we could move forward with that part while you were finishing the other. But obviously you've got to do enough analysis to know if that's where we want to be.
Well, we know that the one-story dorm building is in a lot better shape than the two-story building. That being said, you can't move in right now.
Right.
The paint, to me, is an issue. The flaking of the paint and other aspects of it. And the kitchen, we need to completely look at that. There were some roof leaks in it. But that's a good consideration. So you bring the prisoners out there, certain ones that would work in a dormitory style, and cut your cost farming them out.
Would that lend itself to these prefab cells you're talking about?
It does. One of the real advantages of this conversion of an existing secure facility is it's there. You got something to start with. I mean, you don't have to start excavating and doing soil testing. You've got something to start with. And yeah, a brilliant strategy would be to phase it so that you could you've got a security perimeter. You could get in there and do some units to begin with and stop the bleeding as soon as you can. I mean, that would be a real goal. The other thing that's going to come out of the feasibility study, like Mike mentioned about the lead paint, is identifying some of the issues out there so that when you're negotiating with the state, you know a little bit more about what you might be getting. And make sure that the cost isn't high, because that would be an impact. But yeah, it would be a great strategy to phase stuff in as quickly as you could.
I'll tell you, we've not been privy to your negotiations so far, so we're just guessing at this point what.
Well, we hope the price is going to be zero.
You don't think there's a chance they'll turn over some cash with it, too?
Well, we'd like that.
That was my thought. Let's see if they'll say, we'll pay you to take it. But
But what I'm hearing you say is you see that we could emphasize that, and I don't quite want to call it a phase one and phase two, but an emphasis on some sort of emergency aspect first to get into something like that.
I would change the entrance. I wouldn't bring anybody through the front entrance of that
Right.
two-story building.
Right,
We would just go around back and figure
Yeah,
out another
and
way
use
to get
it.
people in and out.
okay.
But I don't know, short sell, the feasibility component of it, because you're exactly right. The feasibility of the older portion may take a significant,
Right.
albeit significant chunk of time. This is essentially about a third of the feasibility analysis that is just ADA compliance for East Carolina University. So we have surveyed every square foot of their campus, and we're just completing that now. So we are very familiar with going through, and they're actually using this as a playbook for how they go through and allocate funds to addressing ADA improvements in buildings that they have on their campus.
One other question, if I could. We've been operating on the assumption that it would probably take us roughly 3 years to go through the analysis, do the design, construction, and all of that for the permanent solution, whatever that is. Would that be a fair statement of that? The reason that's important is when we're looking at what the cost savings would be if we try to move on those temporary cells, it makes a difference whether we're going to be in there 2 years or 3 years.
You're not talking about the whole facility, you're just talking about an interim phase.
Yeah, I'm talking about an interim phase, but I'm saying for the whole phase, for the whole one though, is roughly 3 years from start to finish, an accurate,
For construction?
everything, to where we move in.
He's saying yes, I'm saying I'm not so sure.
Well,
Okay,
typically, if you're interested, a year in design, 2 years or a little bit more in construction, maybe 30 months in construction. It depends on your implementation method.
Okay.
But the likelihood is, if you're converting an existing facility, you're probably going to gain almost 8 months to a year on that process.
okay,
The design's somewhat simpler, we know what we've got to start with. It needs to fit in this box, plus whatever additions we need.
right.
And the soils are there, we got something to work with.
So it sounds like you're saying somewhere between 3 and 3.5 years that we might, and if it takes a few months to get into the temporary one, then probably roughly 3 years of being in that in terms of cost savings would be about right. Is that a fair statement?
I think you could get into the temporary one, what do you think, a year and a half?
Yeah, we'll probably right.
Okay.
Mr. Doty?
A year and a half?
Well, I
That's a
know-
lot of bleak,
I
guys.
know you like to just pick them up and move them in there, but that's not going to work.
Well, okay.
Sorry.
Couple of issues here, and that is, I like this out of just about your entire presentation, and that is where you actually have got some systematic way of identifying the good points, the bad points, so that it helps us in making a decision of whether or not we need to be building a whole new facility on new location, renovating, going here and renovating this facility. So I assume that what you're projecting here is that you would give us some information in regards to all the options.
Yes, we don't have a preconceived idea at this point. I started off this discussion telling you that our history, MHA Works history, is in saving buildings, turning them into something different, giving them new life. That's where our love is. So we'll be working for that. These gentlemen here will put the reality of the corrections requirements on it. So really, you have the national expertise in correction, and Albie and I in building. And construction and the renovation.
Well, the most important thing about that is it was developed with the county commissioners and key stakeholders as a group of about 15 people. We didn't make that up. We had all agreed on what the evaluation criteria should be, and when we came back with all the options we drew up, we sat down for an entire day and talked through what they were, and we voted on what made the most sense. And this is what came out of it. Now, the original chart was just numbers, averages. But when you apply some color to it, it starts to tell you what makes sense. Now, you could do any of those options are feasible, but what makes the most sense for you and your passion for not spending money you don't have to is exactly what we're talking about.
And I assume that that would work on schools as well. No, I'm sorry,
Sure.
I digress.
I was thinking of the Williams Street location on Wilson County. I like that sheet in here better than anything. Where you seen that one?
Yeah.
That was
That's
that was a
pretty-
blight on the main road going through Roxborough, and now it's an economic generator.
We happen to have one of those as well.
On Williams Street, yes.
We do that.
People were embarrassed about being there, quite frankly.
We don't have that. Person
Oh.
count.
person, and that was a Walmart before.
An abandoned Walmart.
And how long did it take you to renovate it?
We did that in less than a year.
See, now that's.
Well, and I felt my friends' vibe on the time, because even though we're talking about safety, I was trying to take my mind back to walking through the facility. And, pardon me, I don't want to oversimplify it, but I saw you taking out, and I'm thinking I'm the most easy, the one that we walked in where it had some bunk beds left in there and the water faucets were along the side. And when we talked about the park, when I visualized parks, and thanks, sorry, I have not seen them, and I should have rolled with you all to see it, but I just was visualizing it. Safety and expediency. You pull that stuff out and you take those pods that you all should have that probably come in pieces, and I'm not expecting they will come already in a seal. I'm thinking that it's going to be in parts. So you go in there with bolts and air wrenches and so forth, and you assemble them in there and you bring the stuff in. And I'm just, pardon me, in terms of time, I was thinking if this was temporary, that you could move some amount of something in a year. And maybe that's too fast. Maybe I'm fast forwarding too fast.
I don't want to be too aggressive and not work out, and then I'm gonna take the heat for it. So to be a little bit conservative there.
Let me follow up on one thing that Commissioner Cromartie said, because we probably didn't give you the numbers on it. We had figured that if we had 48 beds, not cells, but beds, times $50 a day, times 365 days, that's $875,000. That's about the magnitude of our problem. So if we could get 48 beds in there, we don't need to do the entire thing. We just need to do enough where we can isolate that, and it is done in different dorm wings, as y'all saw. So if we could do 2 or 3 of those and reach that threshold, then I think that would take the pressure off, would you say, Major? And try to do that. So we may have misled you in that we meant the entire building needs to be done. But we're just saying, if we can get about 48 beds in there, that would stop the bleeding for us.
Since you have to do the food service and everything else, the
Yeah.
supply, if you're gonna get anybody out there to do any of those,
Yeah.
that one-story building, I'd do it all.
Yeah.
And just, I fully understand, you kind of go through and you're like, you think, well, it can be done relatively quickly, but, you know, it's a function of when was it last in use? And it's not just, is it in ship shape? It's, you know, the codes also
Building codes.
continuously change. And So without digging deeper, which is part of what the study would be doing, but the systems, the plumbing, electrical, mechanical systems are the time-consuming part and the costly part of having to convert from dormitory to cell or vice versa. So those are the things, and we actually have that expertise with us that has done a significant amount of correctional facility, but that's really where some of that time, we're all architects. That's really where our hesitancy stems from, is the things that are time-consuming aren't taking prefab units and air bolting them together.
But I will tell you that as far as the feasibility study goes, we can pull off that as a special project, if you will, and Albie and I will hit that building tomorrow, and we'll just go through it. We'll figure out what needs to be fixed. We'll figure out what maybe could be fixed. I mean, you have to fix it because it's water intrusion, or it's a structural issue, or a mechanical issue, or a code issue. After that, it's whatever you want to fix.
As we discuss this, Major Greenfield, Sheriff Pierce, y'all been mighty quiet. I'm not putting you on the spot, but I want y'all in this discussion. Now, if y'all have any questions or any ideas, this is going to be y'all's responsibility, and we want your input on it. So anytime you feel like you need to speak, please do.
My questions are being answered, pretty much.
I just want to make sure y'all didn't feel left out.
Thanks, sir.
Give me, probably, okay. Oh, that's fine. Who was that?
Mr. Doherty.
Following back up on that, it may be that we want to do this in two sections, and that is an RFQ in regards to an immediate solution. What I mean by immediate, short-term solution. And here's where I've got problems. If in fact we were just before renovating another facility to accommodate overcrowding on that 30% you were speaking of, that could in fact go into a dormitory, and we were going to spend $2.5 million to do that, to stop the bleeding, it looks like in this facility that we ought to be able to use the 30% population, that not maximum or minimum security, those low-risk personnel, that we can in fact in the short term use a dormitory style if necessary, or divide it up in individual cells, but that we could get in there and do that in a short term, then look at the larger picture to incorporate the entire structure. But we need to stop the bleeding, folks. This has been going on for years. We need to stop the financial bleeding. Thank you.
Mr. Martin.
In the Walmart, and I've looked, but I don't see one. You didn't include in here in the place a blow of what the inside of the cell itself, I mean the cell itself. What's in the cell? A bed?
Are you talking about the Walmart?
In one of your temporary pods that a person was.
That's not a jail. I don't think.
What is it?
County offices.
It's off
Yeah,
the-
Walmart
Let me
was turned
back
into
up.
But it could be a jail.
If that was a jail there, and in any other jails that you've done, what? Let me maybe even make a little bit. If you were doing this room right here, one of your, since we're all right here, and we asked you to come in and do this room and put X number of cells in here, to hold X number of prisoners, what would it look like? I mean, just give us a visual. What would it look like? Is that one?
I think it's one of these slides here. It has,
Which number?
that's a one-man,
What's that page number, sir?
I can't,
Down the bottom right hand corner. I can't.
We ain't got no page numbers. We don't have no page numbers.
That one? Is that?
that was it.
Back up.
Back up one. Back up one.
Back up one, I believe.
Yeah.
We'll get to it.
Is that the slide?
I think, no, it was back
No,
up
it was
there.
one before that.
This one?
No, it had a sink or something in it.
911.
There. All right.
That's a one-man, right?
Now,
No,
oh, Mr. Bill is
that
gone.
could be two.
Mr. Greenfield, is that what,
The single cell has got to be 9 foot, by 7 foot, by 8 foot. That's the, I think that's the, county standard, state standard on the jail cell.
now, is that what you all need right there?
Yes, sir, that would work fine.
That-
Some of those you could put 2 bunks in.
Okay, you could put two, and I see down there you
Might
got
be a
a,
little bit wider than
Right.
the standards would be.
so it's not that you wouldn't put more than one bunk in there, you just gotta make the people in there compatible. Cause
Right.
Mr. Bill talks about, contrary to what some of us may perceive, there may not be any low-risk people in any particular cell because they have differences and they might create a problem with each other. So if that was the maximum of what you wanted right there. See, when I toured the building, I was sort of visualizing you coming in, and we're talking about the temporary, like our county manager sort of fully expanded on. I was looking at a room and what would it take for you to come in there with your walls and bolt them together and put the bed in there, the sink and that forth. And then I'm hearing you say, well, about the cafeteria. Well, we know they're not going to eat right there, but even if they did, you know, there's a little table over there and you bring the food in on a tray in a nice box lunch and however it's going to be done. I'll take them back to the cafeteria in a real organized fashion. I'm just sort of visualizing how I would do that. But getting into the sleeping part itself, and in those quarters that we had out there, that's why I said use this room right here as maybe a thought pattern. But if I was doing it, I'd just come in here and I'd divide from this section, see how many I could put in here with aisles, and I'd take care of what their needs were. Every need they could be taken care of right there. But the other ones, I'm gonna march them someplace and have that done. So I was sort of looking for what it would take, visualizing what we have out there. Come in and use that number that the manager mentioned and put that number of temporary cells in place that met the safety features that Mr. Bell is concerned with. That's sort of it in a nutshell, to me, right now.
Well, I think I clearly understood y'all a while ago. You lock them up and they out for 3 reasons. We're talking about a prison, we're not talking about a Holiday Inn.
Yeah, you have to understand there are some operational differences between a prison, which is what you have, an existing prison, and a jail. They do operate internally, operationally very different. As Jeff's already mentioned, in a prison, you have inmates for a very long period of time, and you can be very, you set up routines with them. They understand that certain times of the day they're going to lunch. You move inmates to the dining room, and they may be involved in programs. So they have a very methodical way of controlling their day because they're always there. They're not going anywhere. In a jail, unfortunately, your population is continually turning over. The people that you're dealing with are continually changing. It's in some cases kind of a revolving door. Not saying they don't recognize some of the people that are in the jail. They're probably there, maybe there multiple times. But you have to understand that, as Jeff mentioned earlier, if you want to contain your operational cost, you really do want to limit the movement of those inmates, because every time you have to escort an inmate somewhere, that ties up the correctional officer's time to do that activity. Kind of answering your other question, about what we would do in the configuration, there's a multitude of ways to design housing pods. Obviously, in the Wayne Correctional Facility, we're dealing with the existing building. We've got to take that existing footprint and work within the confines of what that is. Another way to look at this is perhaps, and we don't know exactly what the situation is in your downtown jail, but maybe you don't look at it as a standpoint of having to build cells immediately. Maybe you look at it as a standpoint of, well, maybe we need to take our minimum security out there and use the dormitories as they exist as dormitories. I don't know if that's what your population needs are currently. Don't know that answer, but there's probably there maybe is a hybrid of that. Maybe it's some cells and some dormitories, and we're retasking. There's probably a multitude of solutions. Unfortunately, we don't know all those answers right now because we actually haven't started the study to understand kind of the detailed needs yet.
But to recap then, the bottom line is y'all are open to phasing the study however we need it. I think you have an understanding of what our need is to expedite this further.
And we're very much accustomed to looking at projects and having what we term fast tracking for portions of that work. We understand that that's a need, it occurs many times. This county's not unique from that standpoint.
Very good.
Anyone else? Sheriff.
Mr. Chairman, in fast tracking everything, let me just mention, please remember staff in this place. We can't run an ad in the paper and put somebody out there to look after these folks overnight. So we're gonna have to get them trained, send them to school. Just please remember that. Thank you.
Mr. Parker.
How long did it take you to do this feasibility study?
The complete study?
You want to go to schedule? Go ahead. The next slide doesn't match what's in the presentation.
We anticipated that question. So currently, from what we know today, we think this is probably a 14 to 15 week schedule to do the initial assessment. Now, that's predicated on the county being able to provide all the information that we need in a time effective manner. We're going to need a number of caseload information from the court system. Basically, need to have a series of meetings with the sheriff's staff to understand exactly what their operations entail. But that's the initial study. We envision it would take approximately that amount of time.
And during that study, of course, Albie and I will be out looking at the existing buildings and trying to figure out exactly what needs to be done to them, and what could be done to them. What can we salvage, what can we just strip the paint, repaint it, and let's go.
And part of that too, in this huge endeavor here, we originally proposed it based on one schedule and one set of budgetary concerns for what this effort would cost. And when we talked to the university about that, they said, well, we need it all done in 3 months. Well, the cost associated with everybody dropping everything in our office to do it in 3 months was very different from splitting it and doing half in 3 months, because they had a chunk of money that they had to get off the books and spent, and then doing the balance of it in the following fiscal year. So that's essentially how we phased this. So it could very easily be a fast track study running concurrent with the balance of the study.
We could do it. I would show up in Greenville with a team, a couple teams, and we check in Sunday night. We wouldn't leave till Thursday. And that's all we did.
Okay.
Focus on that.
Okay, we need to move forward. We appreciate y'all's presentation. No other questions. We have a 2 o'clock group that is here, and it's 2:30. And out of courtesy for them, we're going to move on. But we do appreciate y'all's presentation. Someone, county manager, or someone will be back in touch with you.
Tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Okay.
We are recording again, our second presentation. Ms. Wood or Mr. Cook?
Yes, sir. Noel, if you will, introduce this group to us, please.
Our second group today is Ware Bonsall Architects out of Charlotte, North Carolina. They specialize in justice facilities, particularly detention centers. They are also very experienced in space needs and feasibility studies and assessment and facility assessments.
Thank you. My name is Paul Bonsall. I'm the managing principal of Ware Bonsall Architects. We have been in business as Ware Bonsall Architects for going on 12 years now, but our experience goes back. I've personally been doing jails, I believe, for 22 years, and have been the project architect or a project manager for many, I believe, 17 North Carolina jails, county jails. We are in Charlotte, North Carolina, but we presently have projects that are in Columbus County, here in the eastern part of the state, as well as Hertford County. So we get all over the place. And so as far as helping you and being available to you, we will be right there. We are also working closely with a firm called ADW Architects, and Jim Powell is one of the principals of that firm. I'd like him to speak to you a moment.
Thank you, Paul. My name is Jim Powell. I'm a partner with the firm of ADW Architects. I've been with the firm for almost 29 years now. I'm their partner in charge of all of our civic projects. We've been in business since 1977. We have 29 total staff, and our role in this project would to be provide all of the logistical support for Ware Bonsall. We do share space in Charlotte. When it comes to getting the study done in terms of logistics, clerical, administrative needs, we have the horsepower to help them get that done.
Thank you. Some other members of our team. We have Mike Greer, who will speak with you in a moment. There you go.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. I'm Mike Greer. I'm a captain with the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office. I've been in jail construction and planning for the last 20 years for the Sheriff's Office. I'm responsible for accreditation, safety, facilities, facility planning, transition planning. I've been involved in construction of over $700 million worth of work. This is what I do for Mecklenburg County. I've been invited to join Ware Bonsall on this project and look forward to the opportunity to help out. Thank you.
I met Mike, I guess it was about 6 years ago or so. We worked on Ware Bonsall did a project with Mecklenburg County. It was the annex building. It was 320 beds, and that was a situation where we were brought in to evaluate an existing structure, and we decided it was in very terrible shape, and we then, with the county, then recommended a different kind of structure, and we can look at that as well later. Also with us, we have Pete Keato. I've worked with Pete for 16 years with various companies, and he's worked with me before. As Mike will be doing the operations side of the study and working with the sheriff's office to get you evaluate the study or the buildings and your jail needs. Pete will be working on the architecture side of it. That is taking his knowledge of jails. Pete is unique in that not only is he trained architecturally, he is also has a degree in criminal justice. So he brings a very important part to this team. You want to say anything more about that?
As Paul said, we've worked together for 16 years, and my entire background, even though I trained as an architect, what I actually specialize in is in planning and design of correction facilities. My thesis is actually in correctional design, so I've done this my entire career. And I've worked with Paul for a long time, over the last 16 years, on basically all the jail projects that we've done in North Carolina together. We've worked a lot on the front-end design, needs assessments, relations with the Department of Insurance and DHSR, so this is what we do, is we team up together on all of our facilities, and we've just got a long working relationship, getting together all of the needs and operations ideas that then we hand off to Paul to turn into a building.
Thanks. Let's get on to the next slide here. Why Ware Bonsall Architects? Well, we are North Carolina jail design specialists. We've done many jails in North Carolina, and on our team we have our detention operations professional, Mike Greer. We'll hear a little bit more about him as we go on. We've been doing a lot of work in North Carolina. We understand the North Carolina jail code. It is unique in the country. There are things about it that don't happen anywhere else. As a result, and as going through so many different jails and so many different situations, we have spent a lot of time, and we have very good relationships with the Department of Health Service Regulation, DHSR. That's your jail code regulator. We know those guys really well, as the Department of Insurance. Those are the code folks. The other part of this is that we're the team that's going to be working on your project. We're the ones who you will have a relationship with. We're not just the marketing guys, we're the ones who will be doing the work. I think that's very important, should be. And you will have architects, myself, Jim and Pete, evaluating the buildings in terms of what is there. We know that you are very interested in the 416 building is from the that is part of this state DOC facility, and very prepared to look into that. We've done that quite a lot. We're very familiar with the 416 in particular. That is an old Greer Fripp building, an old Greer Fripp design, and we have a long relationship that goes back to working with Greer Fripp, so we understand that very well. Another part of this is that we also use methodologies. We're very methodical about how we will do this. We have collaboration not just within ourselves, but we will be working with your sheriff's department and anybody else you want to bring into the mix on that. We take the data that we get that's empirical data from the state, and we interpret that in a very rigorous fashion. That is to say, there are a lot of ways of taking numbers and working them to sometimes do the things that you want them to say. Well, we don't do that. We give you the real spiel on what that's going to be. And we communicate that back to you. I think we'll tell you the truth as to what needs to happen, and we'll listen to you as well as and make sure that you're getting the information that you need to make a really good decision on this. So with that, we're adaptable to your needs. We will help you get to where you need to be. And talked about telling you the truth about what it is. I think we're objective about what your goals and what you really want to accomplish here, but we can also give you some alternatives to that. We'll show you some options of how you can approach a building, and we'll help you understand the implications of the decisions that you make. Beyond that, we have a successful record in doing this. We have many, many projects under our belt, and a lot of happy clients with that. A lot of beds under construction and that we built. Done lots of studies all over the state. These are some, even some in South Carolina. Some of your neighbors, Columbus County. Cumberland County is not too far away. I've even done some other work in some other state prison work around. So I understand the DOC side of it as well. I know that you're interested in a jail assessment report. I don't know what the final report is, and here's an example that we did for Yadkin County. Project that was just completed, and I'm just going to blow through these very quickly for you, just to show you the kinds of things that go inside a report, and this was done back in 2011. But their particular interest was looking at the jail population trends and the needs. And they also had an existing facility that they wanted us to look at and see how they could fit that in. And they were also looking at additional sites, and so those were some options that we needed to bring to the table, looking at other sites, being able to dig into those sites and see if they were appropriate for putting a facility on. Then we developed some options for how the things that could happen with each one of those based upon their needs, and then we finished it off with some recommendations. Most jail studies in North Carolina, anyhow, will use the empirical data that is gathered in the state, and we take that information and we take trend lines from that and push it forward. And these are all very typical kinds of things that your jail staff has been collecting throughout. Same kinds of things. In this particular case, they had a pretrial release program, and we wanted to indicate the effectiveness of that. So that was another thing that we were able to look at. With that, we were then able to project total number of needed beds based upon a particular time frame that they were looking to be effective within. Part of the process too here is to then determine what kinds of beds and how many that there are extrapolate that into square footage numbers based upon code requirements, and then put grossing factors to that so that you can tell how big your building is actually going to end up being. It's taking the code needs, your own personal needs, bringing those together, and then turning it into information that can create a real building and give you a sense of what is actually going to be required in for your facility. And that continues to extrapolate out, and you can see it was particularly 32,000 square feet. We did the evaluation. We went within the building and went through it and made certain recommendations, and then a recommendation on what to do with the jail, the old jail afterwards, and how that would fit in with their overall master planning program. We saw that we had the various sites. We did a site evaluation of that, added numbers to it, and were able to determine what was the best site from that. Turned out it was the first choice that they had anyhow, so that was very fortunate. Break down the needs for the beds and the numbers for that. That was, we're able to document that kind of information and that particular need. And from that, from a particular design, or to be able to say, okay, you're going to need so many beds, you're also going to need to project how much staff it's going to require. And we do that as well, and we break that down into the various types of detention officers and how the hours are going to affect that. So that's very important in terms of determining your budget and how you're going to implement any design as you move forward. And then we put some actual dollars to it, depending on what you actually we're going to probably end up spending on this. So you get a heads up of what this is going to what's going to happen with this. Here's an example of what we did on site. We had two different plans, options for what could happen on the particular site that was chosen, and we put some numbers to that as well, not just the construction cost of it, but an annual operating budget, and that gave them a better idea as to what they'd be spending throughout. And then we talked a little bit about the implications of each one of those moving forward. And then we made further recommendations of what that would be, and that's ultimately what you're looking for, is what the study, what we're getting to is what makes sense for your facility and for your county. And this is what we came up with for Yadkin County. This isn't you at all. This is Yadkin County, and this is what we also had a project schedule, how long it would take to build, and we're able to push that forward, how the whole thing would take. Typically, a study of this type, we can produce the study that you're talking about probably in the 3-month period, depending on how often you're able to get your staff together and how intensely we can work with that. So a lot of that will depend upon you, but I see that as being perhaps a 3-month process. And going back to Yadkin County, this is what the building looked like. It was a very low back of house kind of building. They didn't want anything particularly glitzy in that, but it ended up being a very fine facility for them that suited their needs. I would like to talk a little bit about another project that I did over a large period of time. Early in my career, I did this Rowan County Justice Center project. It was an existing 1930s courthouse that we did renovations in. Plus, there was a 1906 building that started out as a Cadillac building, if you can imagine, and then a 1960s jail. And those were the 3 buildings that were on that site. And the program of it required that we upfit what is called the Rufty building, do renovations to the courthouse, historic type renovations to the courthouse, and then add new courtrooms and some more jail space. And within that jail space, we left some open space so that we could then later come back in and do renovations to that. And that's what I want to talk about right now, is that we came back in, or I came back in much later, and took that shell space that we had, and it was left in this condition, such that there were some cells, and you can just see those, but there are no doors and nothing's painted or finished out. But the real problem that came up with this particular facility was that from 1992 until 2010, of course, the codes had changed. And so we went back and were required to make a large number of mechanical changes and do a lot of things. And we did that well within a budget. We were able to work the very best way for that to happen so that the facility was able to add 48 beds. Now you can see here, the blue part is the part that we renovated. Instead of renovating it to regular cells, as was on the catty corner side of that, these were high security cells with a, and what is in orange on there is a control room. But in any case, we were able to do that well within their budget requirements. This is a construction shot just before we were finishing it out, so you can see what a difference it made that we had there. But also the control room was then able to be within sort of a half height, so you can see up and lower. But I think the illustration that I want to bring out here is that, yeah, it's a great architecture of actually building something, but this was something that we planned a decade and a half ahead before then. So planning is a very important part of this, and you really need to get this right. We can do that. We talked a little bit about how the 416-bed facility that you have there is a Greer Fripp facility. Bill Fripp was one of my mentors. I really sort of got into this, and so I really understand those facilities. Pete worked with Bill as well. And the way that it turned out that Greer Fripp, which was Bill's firm, was sold to a company called Freeman White, and my first partner, Glenn Ware, and I were senior members of their justice studio. We did jails and courthouses, just pretty much what I'm doing right now, for Freeman White. Somewhere along the line, Freeman White decided that they wanted to spin us off, and so they essentially gave us the firm and all the rights to those buildings. So we actually own the intellectual property for Greer Fripp building. So we have all the details for that. So I don't actually have the floor plans for it, but we know those buildings inside and out. We really can understand what a Greer Fripp building is and how it works. And right now, Ware Bonsall and ADW are working together on a lot of projects, and we're doing that to pursue a wider range of kinds of things. For ADW has a very wide practice, and Ware Bonsall is into justice architecture. But together, we think we make a pretty good team. And we share space, as Jim said, in Charlotte, so we work very well together, and they can support us very well if we need a little extra horsepower. But I think you'll find that the folks that you see in front of you right now are all you're going to really need to see. So with that, I think I'd like to open it up a little bit. Let's see. Actually, I should probably go back to why select us. We are the experienced North Carolina jail specialists. We know about the North Carolina jail code, and we know the people who will be administering that for you. We do a proven methodology of how to interpret buildings and your particular needs. And we're adaptable, and we have some objectivity toward what you need to have happen. And we're very good at it. We're very successful. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions you might have.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like for you to, in your booklet, to the Rowan County Jail update page.
This one or this?
Right here.
Oh,
and that, I mean, that's where it starts. I know that the previous one is where it starts, and I would forget. And when you use the Rowan County Jailhouse look fit, you mean renovation?
Well,
Upfit.
yes, you see the 1992 jail portion there, the pink part on there?
All right, so that's an existing building.
Well, it
I mean,
was
prior
what,
to, it was,
Yeah.
before you upfitted, it was used for something with the building.
well, I actually designed that building in 1992.
And what was it used for then?
It was an open lot. It wasn't anything. I designed the building
Into a jail?
as a jail.
As a jail,
That
all
was
right.
its first use, yes, sir. And.
So it's always been a jail?
It was always built as a jail, but we anticipated at that time, we anticipated that there were going to need to be additional jail cells. We were far enough thinking at that point that we were able to say, okay, you have.
So what does that picture right there reflect?
That reflects the shell space. That was what was left open in half of, let me get to this next one, that cell. You can see the blue part?
The blue.
That represents an upfit of the blue part. The white part, which is on the other side of that, was fully fit out and was in use.
And what was built in 92?
In 92, yes.
But the blue part was the new part?
It was shell space, correct.
So what, I think what he's saying is he built it, they built it, they just hadn't finished it out.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay.
Well, I'm sorry for the
It's
confusion.
kind of like an unfinished
All right,
basement,
okay,
then he came
because-
back and redid the basement.
All right.
But we also changed the use of it slightly because originally it had been general housing that was actually what's called direct supervision. And in this case, they particularly needed some high security beds. So those
So-
became all single cells.
So the blue and the white is cells.
Yes, sir.
How do they get their food? What do you do with that? I mean, where does the food come from?
The food is actually brought into, on carts, sort of off to the left. This is only a very small part of it. But it's actually brought in on carts into, you can see that center square portion, that's a multi-purpose space. And they have tables in there, and they will feed the inmates from there. For the general population.
Provide the meal and they sit in the cell and eat it.
Mhm. Well, in this particular case, the white half of that, that's the general population portion of it. They actually go into the multi-purpose space and have their meals in that space on tables. The blue portion of it, because it's high security, they have food passes in the doors, and the cart will come through and put the meals right into the cell.
So based upon whatever level of security they are, whether they eat in the cell or eat outside the cell.
Yes.
So in this case, if our sheriff and those wanted to feed all of them in the cell could be divided so they could, arrange so that you could feed them all in the cell. Or if there was some you want to take out, of course you could. What I was looking at, a worst case scenario, what I was trying to see in my mind was, if no one left the cell, how would they be fed?
Okay. In this case, it just turns out also that the cells on the white side there also have food passes, so that could happen.
Okay. But every other need that they have can be taken care of in the cell.
Yes, by code, they'll be required to be let out occasionally for exercise.
Yes, right, I understand that, but all of the other needs they have.
Yes, sir.
Physical needs will be taken care of in the cell.
Not a shower. The shower's in the
Shower
day room.
someplace else.
And in the day room, it's, let's see if I can, let's see if it'll show up. It's not showing up, but there's some X's shown on the plan, and those are these showers.
All right. The reason I asked that thing is, thinking about out there, those dormitories we looked at were turned into this, and they put X number of cells in there with the opportunity for almost every one of their needs to be taken care of in the cell. There would be provision for them to eat, provision for them to have a shower in a controlled manner, but they would be very comfortable as we could make for them inside of that cell, and their needs would be taken care of, whether or not you had a single cell or if you had a double, but we're talking about worst case scenario is a single cell.
Yes, sir. We've done many combinations of single cells, double cells, dormitories, a lot of things that we have done. But but you can do single and double cells, and that may be an appropriate use for, say, that 416 building. That could be done to those facilities.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Pate.
That's what interested me when you were talking about the 416 building. You said, this is the 416 building out here, is that what you're saying? And you're familiar with that design, you own the intellectual property for that design, is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
Would that turn over to, in terms of cost savings and speed up fit, because you have that knowledge of those buildings, you think?
I would certainly like to think so. Yes. The fact that I know how those details are put together, the fact that I don't have to do that research on those buildings. I know that it's a precast concrete plank roof on that. I know that the walls are 8-inch concrete block with number 5 rebar, 8 inches on center in each direction. I know that the floor slab is at least 6 inches thick. I know that the hollow metal doors are 12 gauge galvanized steel. I know a lot about that building. And so yes, I think it will very much translate into.
Okay. Follow-up to that would be, can you see this being able to be done in phases? Because we have a problem where we were, as we said, when the commissioner said, we're bleeding at this time with inmates going out of the county.
It can definitely be done in phases. Well, in the Rowan County, that is essentially a phased facility.
Okay, that's what I asked. Thank you.
Mr. Mann.
Thanks for coming. I have
Okay.
Do you have experience in the sales as far as modules, drop-in modules that are concerned? Are you familiar and have experience with that?
Yes, sir. Henderson County did precast concrete cells, and that was done in, I'm thinking that was 1996. That was early on in my career, but it was very successful. That was 206 beds. A good portion of it was single cells and double cells, but there was also part of that some dormitory areas, and that was a building that is in downtown Hendersonville, right behind their courthouse. A very nice project. Oh, yes. Cabarrus County. That's 480 beds, double cells, in downtown Concord. And that was also part of a project that included phased construction. We had a sheriff's office that was part of that project. Again, right downtown in Concord, so there were a number of difficulties involved with that. It was a jail annex building that we created a small jail that was then attached to the courthouse to take care of some initial overcrowding in the existing jail while we were building the rest of the facility. Again, a phased project.
How recent was this, Cabarrus?
Go ahead.
Cabarrus, we started the design on that in 2003, and the construction was just finished a few years ago. But one of the interesting things for that building, it's actually a 6-level stacked structural concrete precast cell building. One of the things we initially looked at was doing the different sizes of cells, but working with the sheriff, one of the things programmatically we came up with for flexibility was to just size all the cells sufficiently with square footage to be able to accommodate 2 people. So even their single cells, it gave them the flexibility to be able to put 2 people in those cells in the future. And then we upsized the day rooms a little bit to be able to accommodate that, so it gave them actually about 20% more bed space than the actual working plan had in the beginning, that they could actually work that up gradually as they needed to as they picked up more inmates. But that's a very recent one that used that entire facility is precast, pre-assembled cells.
Okay, so these aren't removable modules.
They come in 2 cells on a crane. You can move them. It's a little bit complicated to do it. In this case, they're actually part of the structure of the building. They're holding up the roof and some of the other structural parts of the building.
Yeah.
They can be dismounted.
We had heard about some that were all steel.
There are steel cells as well.
Okay, and
as well.
You know, the popularity seems to be interest not only here in Wayne County but other counties with with these modules, we call them, because once they're installed, they're bolted on the existing floor, like here at the detention center. But the key is that if we decided we didn't want to use that building in the future, we could take those modules out and use them in another facility. And I didn't know if you were familiar with that or something that you might would look at.
Yes, sir, we are familiar with it. In fact, whenever we've done the precast cells, we've looked at it also in terms of doing steel cells. There are many manufacturers of those steel cells, and some of them are good and some of them are not so good. You have to be very careful about that. There are other modular kinds of construction techniques, for instance, steel panels, to where you could essentially have guys going in with steel panels and erecting the cells out of smaller pieces that then can be demounted in the same kind of way. A way of doing that is that they'll go and they'll erect the panels and then they'll fill them with concrete. After that, they can still be demounted and moved.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a number of technologies that we're very familiar with that are available to us, lots.
Yeah, I sort of like the idea, plug and play now. I mean, you can set these modules in and, just a matter of a short time, you're up and going.
Yeah, sure.
One thing to point out on that, and that Paul spent a lot of time reviewing these, all of the manufacturers of those facilities have to be approved by the Department of Insurance in North Carolina before those cells can be used. And what we found in the past is that we get some really good sales presentations, but then we find out that manufacturer, if they're not located here, hasn't gone through the process of being approved by the state of North Carolina. And that can kind of put the brakes on fast, but you spend a lot of time going through the approval process and the review process with those units.
Make sure they meet North Carolina jail standards, the size and that sort of thing.
Not only jail standards, but actually fit into sort of a netherland in the jail code as movable housing, or almost essentially the same thing as a mobile home, which is a very odd situation for that, very strange, and we're not really sure that it should apply that way, but such as it is, that is something that I think that we would be able to pursue with you. Should you really be interested in it, we could help you pursue that and see how far it'll go. As we say, there are, however, some cell manufacturers that are available in North Carolina. Very few. They also have their ups and good sides and downsides. One of the things that we talk about in terms of the ability to put something in and then take it back out, if you were to, just a casual observation, if you were to do that in the 416 project, it would, to take them out and drop them into place, that would mean removing a roof that is extremely strong structurally. It's full of concrete and reinforcing steel. That would be a very expensive option, I would say.
What if you went to the smaller building, the 94 dormitory style building?
Well, that's the one I'm talking about.
Could you not
416.
Could you not go in the wall in the end?
Well, if you were the wall's kind of the same way. It's concrete block with reinforcing in all directions. I don't mean to poo-poo that
Okay.
idea for you. I'm just saying that is something that we would love to pursue with you, but we'll tell you the truth about the problems and the opportunities that presents.
Okay, thank you.
If I'm correct, you stated that your feasibility study would be about 3 months in duration.
I think that we can do yes, I think we can do that.
Would the scope of your analysis include comparing to building new structure, another site, or only in the renovation of the prison facility?
I think, yes, it would include those things. Depending on how many decisions that you've made, how much land that you know that you might want to consider, the way that we could help you out with that. That may stretch that 3-month number depending on how much we can accomplish with what you already know about.
But your 3-month number basically was to analyze and give a feasibility study on the prison. Am I correct?
That also included the notion that you may want to build somewhere else. We would have compared that to what a new building might be, to say that, okay, the cost of doing the existing building is going to be something like this, and a new building is going to be something like this.
Yeah, I, for myself, would like to see an analysis that would include upfitting that building in the most cost-effective way, as well as operational expenses, and comparing it to a new site, new construction. Because I think you'd have to compare that, because it might be in building a new structure, by limiting the personnel requirements, may actually save you money by building them. So I would hope the feasibility study would include that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. King. Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. King. Thank you. The same basic question I asked the other group when they came in is infrastructure. And one thing that I see here that you've done is sort of parallels with what Commissioner Daugherty was alluding to, and that's the Rolling County Justice Center, is that the scope of work on our end, the feasibility study, to incorporate, as you have here, a campus effect. In fact, we have talked about the sheriff's office being here, and then have an annex over there, and then have a facility, jail over there. And so it's sort of splintered, but I'll ask you the same as I asked the other group, is that this basic is the same concept as a campus concept, because we have an investment. How far do we want to invest? And in our scope of work, Mr. Wood, is to look at, do we have enough property? Are we landlocked? And if we want to grow, as your comment for, quote, far enough thinking. Man, I love that statement. But are we thinking far enough out with the gas, natural gas, water, sewer, all the infrastructure we need? You've got buildings here that are 19, you got a building that's 80 years old, another one is 20. This one's over 100 years old. I was just using with the other ones 30 years out. I need to say 50 to 60 years out, 80 years out. So, you know, in our feasibility study, are we going to have something in there, a page or two, is that, are we thinking far enough? Because we have to include the infrastructure, and we have to include land, how much availability we have.
Well, clearly you want to have enough land to where you're not landlocked, if at all possible, because that is the problem.
And the other part was sustainability, to use it as a moneymaker, to somehow be able to house for a fee, to have some kind of income producer in that facility. If you have to do laundry, if you have to make name tags, if you have to create paint, I mean, whatever we can do to have an area there that we can make money to help sustain the project. Do you have a background of putting some kind of study or incorporate that in your study?
Such as a prison industries kind of
anything that we can use this facility for in the future to sustain itself?
Years ago, I did some master planning for Central Prison, and that was the ultimate campus plan. And that had a lot of prison industry and so forth involved with it, but I don't think that that's the extent that you're talking about here. Just, that's my gut feeling.
Or just housing inmates for another county?
That we do that often, and I think Mike can speak to that a little bit, because well, they do that quite a lot in Mecklenburg County. So.
Well, we asked the same question to the other groups. I want to make sure each.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. If you want to build a capacity to create a revenue stream, that's easy to do. That's not a hard thing to do. You know, it's the commitment that you get from the other jurisdictions, whether it's a adjoining county, the state, federal government. It's easy to do.
May I ask a question? We have a neighboring county that's also looking at doing a new jail. they're a smaller county than we are population-wise. Is it worth looking at possibly talking with them about doing one jail?
Doing a regional jail?
Yeah.
Regional jails work for communities that are smaller and need to work together, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a viable
Because
solution.
a lot of the synergies look like they would be there, as far as savings on the personnel and that sort of thing, if you have the wings and that sort of thing.
We have been involved with, I've never actually done a regional jail, because we sort of get to a point where part of the study of that is it gets to a point where everyone says, yeah, that really looks great, the construction costs are there, but the downfall of that sometimes, and there are some good examples of regional jails in North Carolina and other states, West Virginia in particular, but the downfall of those is generally the transportation cost when you're going
Right.
from the other county over. But often, that regional jail concept works very well as an interim step for another county, so that they can make that, not have to put that money in right in front money, and then they can save until they're in a position to build a jail that is closer to themselves.
Right.
And there are also other ways of doing it. For instance, you could do a small satellite jail in the other county that for the arresting and processing would happen in the other county, and then we could move them over for the longer term. So there are a number of combinations that can make that work.
Sort of piggybacking on Mr. Mayo's question a little earlier, and if I understood, you said you're real familiar with our site out there, and you described the walls and the roof and the steel and all that. And if I understood correctly, when he asked about going in the ends, you mean the walls, the roof is expensive and secure, and the ends are secure, and the floor is less, and so exactly how would you renovate what we have there?
Well, I think I would have done a slightly different technology, probably recommend a steel panel system, or even going to masonry inside.
And that's what you meant by smaller steel. You did say smaller panels.
Yes, sir.
So I can visualize maybe a 4x8 panel, like a sheet of plywood. I'm just using that as an example, but something that was as easy to move, put it in place, and that in that structure that we have, it's not a true rectangle, but I just can remember one of them almost rectangular, and then it came together. So you could, whatever the smaller panels could fit in individually the rooms that we have out there.
As I looked at that, that just seemed to be a solution that had a lot of potential to it. I think that as you look at it, you might visualize a metal door would probably be a little bit closer an analogy for you.
Oh, all right, that's
Okay,
fine.
a metal door, they may come in 4 or 3, well,
36
doors usually.
by 72.
Well, usually they're taller. These
Well, all right.
particular ones would probably be in 10-foot heights.
All right, I can visualize that.
But that's the size that those units come in. There's some customization involved with that, and some thinking about how that actually goes together. But we've seen them.
So then that would give us the opportunity to phase it in, and when our manager was talking with the other group, he talked about us phasing things in and making it possible to stop the bleeding over a quicker period of time, but yet keeping in mind that we may continue to renovate. But if we're talking about 36 by 10-foot panels, and it can be brought in and bolted in, then I can visualize our space out there doing that. And then most of their needs being taken care of, in their exception of showers and other things that may have to be removed for the exercise, but they will be self-sustaining, and we could still call it temporary, but it would give us all the safety features that my colleague in the sheriff's department is interested in. So that's what I want to do, be able to visualize exactly what you could do with the space that we have out there on a temporary to long-term basis. We will be, the length of time would probably have something to do with the dollars we have, but I just want to make sure that we understood what that space would look like with what you could bring in on a temporary basis.
I think
That's fair.
Yeah, that's the technology that I was throwing out there. There are other technologies and there are other ways to do it, but if, that is a way that we can accomplish what I think you're going for.
Basically, what you've told us, though, you're familiar with those buildings.
Mhm.
When they were built for a jail or prison.
Prison, yes, sir.
So they're constructed solid enough that we don't have to worry about anybody escaping. But you're, what I'm seeing is, you're also saying that we can take that existing building and not mess with the integrity of the strength of the building or whatever, but go in there and do renovations on the inside, the pod type. I mean, it may not be a pod, it may be permanent. But what you're saying is the buildings that we've got out there are good, sound, strong buildings.
Certainly the Greerfoot building certainly is. I walked through the two-story building with you, the older building. It seemed to be very, very strong. That one is going to be a little bit more of a challenge because it is a two-story building.
Well, I think right now our priority is the single-story buildings. Okay. I'm not saying that the two-story or we're not saying that the two-story building won't be used at some point for something, but I think our priority right now is overcrowded problem that we've got. Our primary objective right now is the one-story buildings.
My gut feeling is that you'll be the most successful pursuing that option.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Parker?
I'd like to ask just one follow-up. Because of, and to give y'all an idea of the magnitude of it, we're spending about $800,000 a year farming people out at $50 a day. And the math we've done, if we had 48 beds, not necessarily cells, but beds, at $50 a day times 365 days, that's about $875,000. So for us to stop the bleeding, we would need to get about 48 beds out there. And so going back to what the chairman was saying is, if we could get something like that done relatively quickly, that would seem to be in our best interest. But at the same time, we don't want that to prejudice the long-term study about where we should go long-term. And it may very well come back and say we should be there. I don't know, either renovation or new. And then if it says new, I guess one of the other options we want to look at is, if we've made that investment, should we incorporate that building into a new structure? If we've got, 20, 30 years of useful life out of it. So all of those things seems to me to be part of a feasibility study that would need to be expedited if it could. But at the same time, we don't want it to adversely impact what decision you make as far as recommending the long-term product. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does.
But I think y'all can see from an economic standpoint, we would like to stop that bleeding just as fast as we can.
And that's a combination of a phased option and campus style and all the things that you've been talking about here.
Right.
And we're listening.
Anyone else? No other questions. We do appreciate your presentation. And Mr. Wood will be back in touch with someone.
Thank you.
We're back from our recess. Ms. Woods, if you would do the honors.
Our third and final group for today is Mosley Architects out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Mosley brings specialized in-house expertise unique to their firm, including criminal justice operations and staffing.
Who's the jail guy? That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Commission, and Noel and Mr. Manager. My name is Dan Mace. I'm Vice President of Mosley Architects, and we're pleased to have the opportunity to present to you today. What we'd like to cover, I've left you a packet, but we do like to cover what we'll be talking about today in our formal presentation. Then, of course,
Feel free to ask any questions as we move along. If you see something, we don't mind stopping and addressing your questions as we go along, or you can just ask us at the end of our presentation, whatever question you'd like to ask. We'll be talking about, I'll be introducing our team, talking about our specific experience with this type of project that you're undertaking here in Wayne County, talk about some key issues that we'll be addressing together, our process that we've put together to successfully bring these projects to a conclusion, and then kind of what we feel like separates us from our competition that you've interviewed today. If there's one thing we want you to come away with is we are your one-stop shop. We have set up our practice to handle justice projects really from soup to nuts, from anywhere from initial planning on initial bed space planning, all the way through to operations, training, transition. We even do procedure manual consulting and PREA. If y'all have heard about the latest PREA regulations that are coming down the pike, we have someone that specializes in that type of consulting as well. So we try to handle justice type projects from because they are very complex projects, and they are very specific to that industry. So we have focused our career on that. It's like if you wanted to get a heart surgery done, you wouldn't go to your general practitioner. Might be a fine doctor, but you really want to go see a specialist when it comes to something like this. I'd like to introduce our team. Again, I'm Vice President. The team you'll see here today, we're hands-on. I will be working along with you in the planning committee throughout the duration of this project. To my left is Russell Giles. Russell heads up our construction administration group, and he has just recently finished up the Greensboro jail expansion project, which is downtown Greensboro, the largest capital project they've ever undertaken, finished months ahead of schedule and $10 million under budget. So he's quite, very familiar with this building type and has a lot of success with his track record. He'll be performing and helping us with the physical assessment of your prison facility that you're considering and looking at that and coordinating with the HVAC team, an engineering team. To my right, Todd Davis. Todd Davis heads up our jail operations group. Todd is not an architect or an engineer. He formerly ran the Alamance County Jail. He's a major, and so he brings a very unique stakeholder perspective to this type of project. He's been there, done that, and we approach things from an operational point out, because operational efficiency is really what can significantly reduce the cost a county has when they operate a facility. And so we really approach it from that perspective toward the design. And Todd basically meets with your groups, and then they tell us, the architects, how to best implement that from a physical standpoint. We also, as I mentioned, Laurie Gibbs heads up our PREA consulting and our operations and procedural manual consulting. We have in-house, again, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural engineering. We also, very unique to us, we have in-house security engineers. Jenny Mann currently serves on the ASTM F-33 committee, which is a national committee that tests security systems. So she's well recognized nationally, and she's right there in my Charlotte office. And so she knows about all the complexities of current technologies that are involved in jail design and can bring those interests to bear. So you're not just dealing with a sales guy who's going to try to sell you all their bells and whistles. We also have in-house environmental planning services. John Nichols specializes in that for us, because we want to make sure that whatever solution we recommend you is as energy efficient as possible. Because again, 80% of the cost to a county for a facility like this is in maintenance and operations, not in capital, not in bricks and mortar at all. So we want to be able to keep those costs in check. We've been in business since 1969. We specialize, again, we do public work only. Again, we're very fortunate and very honored to be working with you on our K-12 side with the county on some school renovation projects here. But again, Todd and Russell and I all focus on justice type projects. And we've done over 100 of them. In the last 10 years alone, we've got 180 architects and engineers in our company-wide. And we're very proud of the fact 85% of our work is for repeat clients. I think hopefully that tells you something, that we are a service-based company. In North Carolina, it's a small community. You guys talk to each other. And if we aren't doing our job, guess what? Your associates are going to say, don't run away from Mosley. We encourage you to call our references, call any of our clients, and just ask them if they'd hire us again. We think you'd get good feedback from that. And we've done 45 LEED certified facilities, which are green projects. We only serve the Carolinas and Virginia, and with just those 3 states primarily, we're ranked 20th in the nation in terms of government sector architectural firms. We've been published nationally in Correctional News Magazine, which is kind of all the sheriffs and jail administrators get this magazine. We did Butner's Federal Prison, which is the first green prison in the world. We've done more jail studies in North Carolina than all the other firms you've talked to combined, including 2 recent ones. We're working with Bladen County right now and Robeson County right now. Both of those have considered utilizing state correctional facilities that were available to them. Now, a lot of these facilities are very similar because they were all constructed essentially at the same time frame. But yours is a little different, and Russell will cover some of these things later than what we've seen in Bladen and Robeson. This project in particular, you might be, we wanted to feature for you. This one was just finished late last year. It took about 11 months to construct. We took an existing, you can see that bottom right corner image right there. That was this existing dorm facility that the county jail facility had that wasn't in use. It's a pre-engineered building, like a Butler building or metal building. And we took that and turned it into a juvenile detention center by bringing in steel modular cell pods and forklifting them in place on the existing foundation. And we're able to do that for under $75 a square foot and constructed in 11 months. So, and it's for juveniles, so it's got to be essentially indestructible. Anything you put a juvenile in, they'll tear up. Anybody who knows they tear things up first. And so it's very proud of that facility, and it really came out nice. You can see the before and after is quite amazing. We also just finished up working with Mecklenburg County doing their arrest processing center renovations. We did that, and they've rehired us since then we're doing the entire security system overhaul at that Jail Central campus and Jail North. So again, Jenny Mann with our security engineer is redoing their entire security electronic system as we speak. Charleston County Jail, this was a design build project. We understand that the county is implementing a lot of design build type projects, so we wanted to show you some familiarity with that type of project. This is the largest capital project Charleston County's ever done, on schedule, on budget with 0 change orders. And that building has a whole nother building underneath it. We put that building on 80-foot piles because it sits on pluff mud right near Ashley River. So to hold a building that heavy up was a feat. That's right. So there's a lot of money there just under the ground that you don't get to see. Hopefully we'll have a better site out here. Harnett County, I'm just going to bump through a few projects just to kind of give you a glimpse of some of our built work in North Carolina. Sampson County, Transylvania County. This is the first LEED certified silver public safety facility east of the Mississippi. Craven County, this is a computer rendering we did, and this is kind of how it came out when we were done. Rockingham County, again, this was jail, law enforcement center, and courthouse. LEED Gold, so it's a green building. We just finished up Cumberland County's jail expansion there. Again, Russell was working on that one actively. Finished on time. Guilford County, again, Russell's projects. This was not it's similar to design build, but it's called CM at risk, as was Cumberland. So it's still a guaranteed fixed price, and some of the advantages of design build, but a slightly different procurement methodology. A few of the planning issues we see is when we start with a project with you is we first start with our ears open. Every county is different. Your needs here are different than other counties, so we don't have anything boxed up we're going to submit to you. But we're going to meet and to really try to absorb what you need here in this county before we make recommendations. Again, we can almost guarantee going in what's envisioned, maybe what your needs are, and then what's affordable on the right. You know, how many people have heard, just put them in tents out in the woods somewhere? There we go.
Well, you were here earlier today.
Yeah.
Less than 10 minutes ago.
That's right. So that's the thing, you know, I think the correct answer for your county is somewhere in between these two, honestly, because the state unfortunately will not let us put them in tents. And that, nor do you need to build a Taj Mahal. So I'm gonna turn it over to Todd right now to cover our target, and then we'll move from there. Todd? Just
Thank
press that right button when you get ready.
Like with every case, you need to identify what the elephant's going to be first before you can figure out what it's going to be. So to start with, once you already have your established jail committee, I'll meet with them and then I'll collect data from the sheriff's office, from the local confinement reports, and we'll do a bed projection on how many beds we think you're going to need in like 5-year increments. And then look at the type of beds, because we know in taking over the prison unit, there's a difference in prisons and jails. Prisons, what they do is they classify based on that unit. Like everything at one unit may be one